It's running.
We think in medicine the quality of the doctors and the actions and the attitudes they have are crucial in getting the best possible medical care. That's what we stand over in open government. I'm going to talk to you about it in two main points. I'm going to talk to you about a personal conviction of doctors and why we can get better on our side of the house. And I'm going to talk to you about how you fundamentally get better doctors and a better health service. Just a bit of a model and some framing on what we're going to do. The kind of treatments we're talking about are things like not providing abortions, not providing contraception, refusing to do blood transfusions. If you're, for example, a Jehovah's Witness. I think specifically what we will make doctors do is declare them when you are hired or at performance review yearly and tell them specifically what treatments you don't want to do and what treatments are against your religion. We think what that allows you to do is means we can tailor doctors' rosters to ensure that whenever there's a hospital treatment or whenever there's an A&E service, there's always someone there to be able to provide a termination if we need to. There's always someone there to provide blood transfusion. We think we've asked it's a minority of doctors who will opt out of these treatments, so we think that we will always be able to accommodate circumstances to make that possible. We think at the vast majority of cases, doctors don't work on their own. There's nurses on hand to do things like perform determinations, to do things like perform blood transfusions. But even if, we think we're perfectly happy to make this happen. And when this isn't true, when it's in the case where it might be a rural community, or it might be a one-person doctor, or one-person doctor, clarification, I'll take it again in the model. If it's a one-person doctor, we're happy to do things like specifically legally compel them to tell people where you can access a pregnancy or where you can access contraception. We think that's a fine thing to do. We think that gets rid of the harm of rural communities. Yes.
All right. So while this model is about the doctors, what about the patients? Does that also send them so they can deny?
Well, under status quo, patients can already deny them. I don't think this is the debate. This debate is about specifically doctors denying and opting out of treatments on medical grounds. I exist in status quo. It's not a debate. Okay. First point on personal conviction. So asking a medical practitioner who's sworn to a Hippocratic oath to do something that they think is murder is morally abhorrent. Because note that when you terminate a pregnancy or you give someone a blood transfusion when you're religious, you often view that as denying someone the ability to access an afterlife. When you're a Jehovah's Witness and someone gets a blood transfusion, you view their soul as being permanently damaged so they can never access the same kind of afterlife. We think it's hugely damaging to doctors to do this. We don't think it's unfair to say the doctors will feel horrible about this. We don't think it's unfair to say religious doctors have to perform abortions will feel things like PTSD at the point which they think they've killed another life. I think there's two moral claims to this debate. Number one, we think it's entirely unnecessary. Note that it's abusing staff to force them to perform this. Even if we say doctors work in large teams, and specifically in large hospitals, that's the case. Even in the developing world, we get significantly other organizations around and other doctors in that hospital to perform these circumstances. We don't see the necessity to specifically demand that they perform an abortion or a blood transfusion in every single case. Secondly, what we say is there's a specific line in which we don't ask medical professionals or just civil servants in general to cross. So, for example, we don't ask emergency service personnel to take their own lives in the hands of the state. So, for example, if I'm a fireman and the building is too structurally unsound for me to enter, we don't compel firemen to enter that because we recognize that it's never morally acceptable to do so. Because fundamentally, these individuals had a life long before they consented to join the state and will have a life long before they have to decide to leave. We think it's unfair and illegitimate to allow them to do so. Note that we think even in the case of armies, we think it's only justifiable when there's a real direct threat to the state. Because the comparative in that specific case is me as sending an army in allows for a vast majority of more people to be saved or better versus a single trade-off, which is the doctor's morality versus the patient's safety. We think that is specifically different, and that's why we stand over armies. But even if that does matter, note that we do every metric to prevent armies getting harmed. We do things like highly trained, and we spend billions on our defense service to make sure they're the least possible way to cause any harm to themselves. That's something that we do for every other kind of public service and every other kind of industry. We think that's specifically true for doctors. We think there's substantial harm at the point at which you perform something that is morally wrong, you perform something that is against your religion, and we say as a state, you have a duty to ensure that doesn't happen. Second point on better doctors. So, under status quo, there's many extremely clever and talented people, particularly in specific countries, in religious countries, who don't access the medical field because they recognize they're going to be forced to do something that's against their religion. They don't want to access a field they would be highly qualified in because they recognize that it's something that's an incredible harm to them. And even if we say on our side of the house that some doctors are less effective, you know, there's a comparative in this debate that we say in a hospital of 100 doctors, we say there may be like 5 or 6 who opt out of specific treatments on medical grounds. the comparative exists, that you get more people willing to enter the medical field, or more people who previously wouldn't have entered that industry specifically on that target. So we think on the comparative, you get better health service than that. But note, you also get more committed doctors, because the doctor feels like they're fundamentally doing something they don't want to do, and they're not defying their morals. That's specifically better for the way the doctor acts and interacts with these people. I'll take a PY from back.
So what happens right now is that you can choose not to take specific positions in which you ultimately don't want to do. What you're saying is that within these positions, they ought to have these obligations, but now they deny to perform these obligations at the expense of the patients.
Yes, the debate is specifically that we're going to stand over them opting out of specific treatments. We don't think it denies the obligation of the patient in that we already said the fact that, number one, doctors don't work alone, and number two, we're happy to roster it so there's always someone on staff. We don't think it's the fact that they specifically going to deny medical treatment. We think it's probably the case they will have to get another doctor in that specific circumstance, or they're on call in an A&E. We don't think it's an incredibly large harm. Secondly, on why else do we think to get better doctors and better health? What we say is doctors are trusted more. Because when I go to a doctor, I have to know that they have my interests in heart and want to treat me the best way. But more importantly, I have to know that those doctors' interests and the doctor's morality specifically line up with what I want to do. That's why I have great trust in my doctor when I think they're doing what is best for me. When I have a doctor who I know is extremely religious, who thinks that performing an abortion on me is murder, or thinks that giving me a blood transfusion is going to deny my ability to access heaven, I don't have that same trust in that doctor. At the very least, that doctor has some animosity towards me or doesn't trust in me the same way they previously wouldn't have. We think that specifically when this happens, what it means is you get more empathy or a better relationship between doctors and patients. The single best way to ensure better quality healthcare is when you can trust your doctor, or just on a daily basis that you feel more comfortable surrounding the circumstance with your doctor. We think when doctors are forced to perform things like abortions or blood transfusions or give you contraception when they don't want to do that, you break that patient-doctor relationship. You specifically get that on our side when doctors are more willing to do that. Because when I as a doctor know, or when I as a patient know those doctors' morals are in line with me, or I know what they're doing to me, they don't think it's absolutely abhorrent, I think that's specifically better in forging a better relationship between doctors and patients. We think that results in a better healthcare system, even in areas where doctors have to refer you to other people. The bar now exists when you're in a rural community that you never could have accessed contraception under either side of the house. Specifically now you get referred to places where you can access that. We think you get better quality healthcare and more access to that in those circumstances. We think morality is something that we weigh up in the public service for a variety of circumstances. We think we recognise that some people's morals and their life shouldn't come before the duty of the state. That's something we stand over for all fields in civil service, and that's something we specifically stand over for doctors. So happy to propose.